All right. Welcome to the Let's Talk About It Minot podcast. I'm your host, Rob Fuller, born and raised here in Minot, North Dakota. I'm a current city council member, and somebody thought it was probably a good idea to ask me to get on to podcast and talk about stuff. So we're going to give this a whirl. All the opinions and everything I say will be in my personal opinion and not as a city representative in most cases. So just bear in mind with that. Mr. Tuttle, I'm talking to you. But otherwise, weekly, bi-weekly, what we're going to do is we're going to get on here. We're going to talk about things that are happening nationally, things that are happening in the state, and things that are happening locally. And we'll have some opinions. We'll have some different guests. And hopefully down the road, what we can do is kind of get some people to call in. If there's anybody out there that wants to get on and talk about some stuff, reach out to myself or Jonathan Starr at the Dakotan and let us know. But otherwise, I'm sitting here today with Jonathan. He's going to be my first guest host, I guess.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about some things going on in the world. How you doing today?
Doing well. You know, I was thinking on the way up here, we don't got many of these precious days left.
No, we're running out of the nice days.
Yeah, we are. It's a beautiful day out, so
yeah.
I can't complain. But it's pretty exciting that you're doing the podcast.
I think exciting might be a little bit of a reach right now. Let's see how it goes, and we'll determine from there. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about going on right now.
I think one thing, and maybe you might feel differently on this, but I think one thing that's interesting with people is the ones that are very well thought. We'll use the word based, right? That's the common word right now. That have a strong base with them, good sense of thought, are the quiet ones. Mm-hmm. And we need people to be more vocal.
I think you're right. I think you're right. We've seen a lot of that both nationally and I would say even maybe locally,
right.
Where the people that have the good ideas and have done the research and the due diligence to know what may be the best way to do something, they're the ones that are just kind of pushed to the back right now, and the people that don't really have any valuable input are the ones that are running things.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Now, you're not running into that directly on city council, but how's the time gone on city council? I'm a guest, but I'm going to turn it back on you. How have you enjoyed your, you're almost like 4 months in?
Yeah, well, so what? We got elected July 1st was when we took over. So, I mean, we're at September, so we're 3 months, three and a half months in. We were talking about last night, so we had the governor's reception for the Hoos Fest,
yes.
and obviously being city council members, they invite all of us. And most of us showed up there, and we were sitting at the table talking briefly, and I was like, "Oh gosh, I almost thought we had a meeting on Monday, but we got our fifth fifth Monday this month." Yeah, so we're like, okay, 2 weeks out. But honestly, it's been fun. It's been interesting, and there's obviously I'm learning some things, and we've talked about this a couple times before. But I thought the budget process was very important, and I think we all as a group came together finally and realized, there's some things we got to do and there's some things we got to fix. And we got through that. And now there's been some of the little things, like I think driveway issues and some of the other things that come up, and sometimes, where a citizen might sit there, be watching the city council meeting or something, or like, oh, why are they talking about this or whatever? That person that comes in and talks to us, that's one of the most important things going on in their world right now. And so I think it's good that we see some of those things and we try and help figure them out. But I also think we could maybe let some of the ordinances and stuff that are in place, I think we need to look at and rework, so some of those things wouldn't necessarily have to come to us.
Right.
So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. Kyla and I were talking about this, to see the votes start changing, because it started out and someone put a warning out to me or regard like this shouldn't be a new versus old thing, and I agree. But felt like out of the gate there was a lot of 4-3 votes where it was new versus old.
Yeah,
and there was a meeting a few weeks ago where you could see that things were starting to change a little bit, but at this budget meeting, by the end of the meeting, things had changed. You could
drastically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to see. I think it's a good thing. It's very healthy.
I do too. I think, part of that can be attributed to, the 7 members that were on city council. You lose 3 members to 3 new people.
Right.
And the word was, I think everybody said, oh, they're going to cut the budget no matter what at every expense. It's going to hurt the employees. It's going to hurt the city. It's going to hurt everything. And so I think there was a little bit of that going on. People wanted to kind of feel us out, see what we were all about. And as they've got to know us and we've got to know them, I think we find that there's more common ground than we originally thought there was. And I think you're starting to see that in the meetings.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. Well, pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Enjoy to see what you guys got going on over there.
Oh, yeah. We got a lot of stuff. We got a special meeting coming up on Friday, special city council meeting, or at least maybe I shouldn't say that yet, but I think they were planning that for Friday. They were asking us all if that worked to discuss the investigation into the police department and the chief of police and stuff like that.
Yeah, you guys wouldn't just create havoc.
Who's you guys? Like the city council?
The city council as a whole, but all right. So this is a perspective thing. So correct me, okay?
Okay.
Because this is the part that will get me in trouble of saying new versus old. But 3 new guys get voted to the city council.
Yep.
And then 2 months later, chief police goes on leave.
Okay.
All right. You can't tell me that there was something that happened in those 2 months. There had to be something pre-existing stuff. Now, something could have came up in those 2 months. And I know I've referenced it a few times that there was an open records request. I forget the date of that may or may not have anything to do with, like, be just a linchpin in this whole thing. But I mean, it feels like potentially that you guys were a little bit of a catalyst that maybe got something rolling in this, and I could be completely wrong. It's just from a parent's sake.
Yeah. Well, there was some things that came up, and I think there's,
you have to be careful, probably.
Yeah, there's some things I can say and some things obviously I can't say. We don't want to get into too many details or anything like that. But there was some stuff that came up that was brought to everybody's attention, city council, city management, and that. And so they started looking into it. And when they started looking into it, they found that there was some things over the past 4 years that were questionable or would lead us to go, okay, why is this happening? And one of the things I will be honest about is the steady stream of people out of our police department and our dispatch area. We have lost a lot of people over 4 years, and that's very concerning. We're talking about, and I think you saw it at the last city council meeting, they want to take $100,000 and throw it at recruiting, right? And I'm fine with that, right? I think that's a great idea, but before we start worrying about recruiting, we have to worry about retention. Yeah. Because if we weren't losing as many people as we were losing for whatever the reason is, we wouldn't have to be throwing money at recruitment. And so when I first heard about everything, I thought they were mutually the same thing. And now I realize they're actually mutually exclusive. If we can retain people, we don't have the recruitment issue that we think we have,
right.
And so those things are all being looked at. Some other allegations and some things that came out are being looked at. There's going to be a private investigation company or law firm that we're talking about having come in and do this because I think the majority of people within the city and within the police department feel that we can't look at ourselves anymore. There's been a lot of that over the last few years where we've investigated ourselves and maybe not always made the right decision. And again, so there's a lot going on there. We have to let the investigation just play out and find out what's going on. But, were we catalysts? I don't think that we alone were catalysts. I think it was everybody. I think time. Yeah, I mean, stuff has been going on for a while. And so it's time we need to stand up and pay attention and say, okay, let's figure this out.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So,
interesting stuff for sure. I'm excited to see how it turns out.
So
I'll be tracking. Okay.
Now, you're my guest. What did you think of the budget process? How did we do? How did the council as a whole do?
Give it a grade.
Yeah.
Well, I think anytime that you're able to get money back in the people's pocket, that's a win. And
absolutely.
The whole council had to agree whether they wanted to or not. So 7-0 vote there.
What do you mean they had to agree? Well, they could have said no.
Yeah, they could have said no. Might
be political suicide, though.
Exactly.
Right?
That's kind of what we're getting at. They could have said no. One of them has said that they're not running for re-election, so they could have said no.
Right.
I think 2 of them have said that. So if they're truly mean it, then those 2 could have said no, and the other one may have not been able to say no.
Right.
I think it's political suicide if you're going to go and vote against that when it makes sense.
Right.
Obviously, if we're going to go in debt as a city,
yeah, then
it doesn't make sense. But so that was something that was different. That hasn't been done, at least since I've been paying attention. So big move there. And I think it was also cool to see the priority, like the bus. Do we need it? And even I think Brian Harinka was not thrilled about the idea of doing a 15 passenger bus because they want to be able to keep up with peak times. But I mean, I think it's the council's job to look at it and be like, are we really planning for peak times? Like, is that how we live our lives? As far as, I mean, we should all be driving 15 passenger vans because there are times where we need to carry 10 people around with us.
And that's exactly right. And I mean, that was, I think, when we talked about it and Mike had come up with the idea of getting the smaller buses, in our peak times, let's say it's 7 to 9 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Before school, and then 3 to 5 p.m. after school.
Right.
We could maybe run 3 or 4 of the bigger buses during those peak times, right, when school's in session. And all the other times we could be running the smaller buses, which obviously cost less to maintain, cost less to operate, cost less to staff to some degree maybe. But, it just, it made sense. And so like when we were talking about it and we got to the point, well, no, we're not going to do the hybrid. Okay. And then it comes back and it goes, no, we're not going to do the regular full-size bus because we don't believe we need another full-size bus. Right. I mean, I think you said it a moment ago, some common sense ideas there, right? Why stack it for peak season when peak season may only last 2 to 4 hours a day?
So how is it, and I get a little bit of this, but how is it fully the city's responsibility when some of that peak times could be having to do with kids being transported?
Well, and that's another question I have too. And again, I've never looked into it or delved into it in any form as a citizen or as a council member. But Minot High has a giant garage full of buses down across from Minot High, and I know they're used for sporting events and everything else. But you're telling me we can't start busing kids that need buses for the public schools with our existing fleet from the high school, not from the city. I don't know why it has fallen to the city and why there is no bus routes. I mean, they got a huge budget over there at the school board. You'd think they could put busing in there.
They do have a huge budget. They do have
more than the city anymore.
Yeah, so. They ask for more money than the city. It's crazy.
Or maybe they levy more. Let's go that route.
They may not get the sales tax. Minot Parks is wanting to get a sales tax, which is interesting.
I've heard a little bit about that. And again, I've heard different things. I would have to find out if this is true or not. But somebody did tell me that if they go ahead and they get that on the ballot and they vote for that 50-cent sales tax, that the property tax portion of their funding would go away. Then they would be funded directly by sales tax, which in my opinion, I think that's fantastic. I mean, just on my, personally, again, on my property tax bill, my park district stuff is like $2,100 a year. I mean, and again, I'm not necessarily complaining, but if that can go and drive down my tax bill, I'm okay with that.
Right. You can control more spending.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sales tax is a little bit more fair and evenly, right? I mean, again, anybody coming into the city, visitors, tourists, travelers, people coming in from the small towns to buy stuff, then they're helping to take care of the park district stuff, which I think a lot of them or some of them probably use to some degree.
Yeah. So. Right. No, you're right on that. City council. So I mentioned I had a third one.
Okay.
Bus. The other deal was, and maybe you can't comment on this, but I'll leave it general.
Okay.
There was a comment that was made by one of the city council people of that it's our job. We face tough decisions, and future councils have to face tough decisions, essentially. And so concerning the grant money, potentially for the fire, that would be a 3-year grant, and it'd help cover some of the costs of those fire people. And then after that, it would then become we don't know where the money would come from to pay for them.
Right.
And down the road, they can figure that out. Like, I get like that to an extent, to a certain level. Let's not say no to this simply because we don't know where it's going to come from. Let's see if there's a reasonable place for this money to come from. And if there is, then we could potentially proceed, right? But on the other hand, let's not say yes to this because we have grant money and not worry about where we're going to pay for this. Like there's this balance, because it feels like when we say future generations have to figure this out, future councils have to figure this out, it seems like that's just a hole that could keep us down
Yeah, ask our federal government.
Yes.
$36 trillion.
And it grows every single day
Yep.
to a point where we spend more on our national debt than we do on our military.
Yeah.
And
Our debt payments are higher than our military budget on an annual basis. Can you believe that?
Like there's some people that would be crying. They would be so upset. They would be storming Capitol if they realized that was going to happen in the future. They would not be thrilled about that at all. And yet it's simply because nobody wanted to stand up and say, hey, no, we can't do that because we don't know how we're going to pay for it.
Well, and I think, so to answer the first question, I think it was, how do I feel about that idea? I'm not big on that idea. Like when you budget, right? I don't care if you're budgeting at home, you're budgeting in a business, you're budgeting in the city.
Yeah.
You can't just look at, hey, I'm just going to focus on the 1 or 2 years that this is important to me. And after that, whoever's on here can figure it out. Because as you're seeing, like we just talked about nationally, we're putting future generations nationally into a big hole.
Right.
That how is this ever going to get fixed? And so when you bring that back down to the local level, and while I'm not opposed to hiring the firefighters and everything that we need, and I think the grant that's out there is a great idea to stimulate and start that. Then down the road, right, we're putting in 3 years, and let's just say on average, I don't know what firefighters make right off the bat, but let's say it's $200,000 for 3 firefighters.
Yeah.
We got $200,000 in wages, and then we have whatever, another $30,000 to $40,000 in benefits, insurance, and everything else. Well, I get that the CPSM study said we need to have these firefighters to be safe with 4 firefighters per ladder truck, right, rather than just the 3 that we currently have. And if everything were all well and good right now within the city of Minot, I would say, you know what, let's do this and we can figure it out. But things aren't all well and good. Like I heard you guys talk yesterday, and one of you guys had said, I mentioned in the city council meeting, we have projects planned for the next 15 years or whatever. What I was referring to, and it isn't just 15 years, but what I was referring to is the flood control, right? Everybody in town, their emphasis is on this flood control, right? Yeah. And it's $1 billion project. And every time we put out requests for proposal, RFPs to say, hey, what are you guys going to bid here? Ackerman Esvold and the Souris River Joint Board have said this is what it should cost. And then we get it back and it's 25 to 50% higher than they told us it was going to cost just 30 days ago. And so we have to make some decisions in the city of Minot, right? And then that's where we're going to have to put on some hats sometimes that maybe everybody doesn't agree with and say, look, if we got to continue to do this and absorb these costs, which I think we spoke about at one other city council meeting, and Jason Sorensen said, hey, if these continue like this, we're either going to have to pause or stop flood control because it's not realistic to keep absorbing these increases. Yeah. So that's what, I think when it comes down to firefighter things like that, or any other aspect of the city where they want to increase and do something, where are we going to get the money, right? Where are we going to get the money? Because the sales tax pennies right now are gone. Yep. Unless we put another one in place. But the sales tax pennies are gone. So none of that money is there to be used for anything. Right. And again, firefighters aren't paid through sales tax pennies. But I'm just suggesting that until some of these other funds are not tied up the way they are, because honestly, and I think I mentioned this one time to you, our kids will still be paying on the flood insurance bonds 45 years from now, if you can believe that. Like, that's a big legacy that, you don't want to have to leave to the future generations.
It's one of the only gifts that keep on giving.
Yeah, right. Debt. So anyway, to answer your question, I don't feel like we can do that. We have to look into the next 3 to 5 years as the people leading the city and say, this is where we want to be, and this is how we need to get there. And there's some decisions we have to make in there, which aren't always favorable, but like I said, until some of this stuff goes away, we're kind of stuck.
Yeah. You think this show's ever going to get you in trouble?
Gosh, I hope not. If you're asking me city council stuff, I'll just discuss the stuff I can. And if you're asking me personal stuff, I'll give my opinion, which has nothing to do with me as a city council member. So
yeah, I hope it doesn't. Yeah. That's good stuff though. It's, I think it's interesting to see some of the actual thought process that goes on with some of the decisions that are made.
It is. I think the discussions, and that's one of the things we hear from a lot of people. the discussions that were never there before, the questions that are asked and the things that are coming out, people appreciate that no matter how the vote goes. But it is interesting to see it unfold when we haven't seen it before.
So, and I know that as you mentioned, this is your show, and I'm asking a lot of questions.
You're helping me.
But what's your view of? I may have asked you this on air before. I may have asked it when we were on Minot Talk. I can't remember. What's your view of what the city council person should be?
Well, I can only speak for myself, right? So,
absolutely.
In my opinion, I was elected to bring some change, some fiscally conservative change to the city council or to the city of Minot. People felt that they weren't being listened to, they weren't being represented. So when I get up there, I'm asking questions and making decisions based on what the people that I talk to regularly say they would like to see out of the city and the city council as a whole. And so I'm up there not just of my own volition and what I think. I'm trying to represent all the people that elected us and have some input in this.
So that would make it sound like you're elected there for a purpose, and so there would also be an end date, or there'd be a new purpose. And I'm not picking at anybody.
Right.
I'm not. This is not where I'm trying to. These are not leading questions.
Right.
I'm just genuinely curious about how you view that.
Well, are you asking me, do I want to be a politician and a city council member forever? No, that
wasn't part of the plan.
That wasn't ever a thought process for me.
Yeah.
What I'll say is this, while I and other people in the community feel like there's issues and things that need to be maintained and handled, I will stay there and do my best. And if people don't think I'm doing my best and want to get rid of me, every 4 years they have that option. Yeah. And so, again, I'm just up there trying to do the best thing I can by the people in this city that need some, not only tax relief, but need some help in some areas because of things going on nationally. Yeah.
And it sounds like even potentially, in some cases, leadership within the city, make it a more solid place. And after all, it's just 4 hours, 2 to 4 hours every other Tuesday.
Yeah,
night.
just 2 to 4 hours. There's nothing else in between.
Nothing else. It's pretty low key gig there.
all of how do I say this? I'll compare it to college.
Oh yeah.
Right? You think you're going to go in there and you're just going to wipe it all out and you're going to know everything. And then you get in there and you don't. And there's a lot of studying and things you got to look into, and research. Because when we get the agendas on Thursday nights, usually we have 4 days before city council. And so if there's things we don't know that are on the agenda, we don't always know everything in advance. Well, I don't know what that is, that like Mike could pull a consent item just because there are things we want to talk about. So you have to do research, then you have to get a hold of the people within the city that can answer those questions.
And these are like 100-page agendas. And I'm not kidding. Like they're when you show up to city council, they're like 2 or 3 pages, whatever they are. But when you actually get the full packet, it is
if you're
thick.
Printing off all the memos and everything else. I mean, so when we get the agenda, like you have all the agenda items or all the consent items or each one, you click on it and then there's the memo and there's the recommendation and there's any other supporting documents. Sometimes there can be 5 to 8 documents in there that you got to look at and read through to understand what this is all about.
Right.
So,
absolutely. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
Studying.
I don't want to run for city council.
You don't? Are you more of a state level guy? Is that what you're thinking?
I think I'm more of the guy that sits behind the desk and
Governor Starr
just goes and picks at you guys. I think that's right.
So you're one of the critics.
I'm a critic. I'm, as they call, the keyboard warrior.
Yeah. What was it that Vince Lombardi said about the man on the field?
He always had good things to say. I don't know what was it.
I'll let you look that quote up.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah, epic stuff. So there's some interesting stuff happening at state level too. You've been following that?
There is. Yeah, we've been looking and hearing a lot of stuff now. What do you think about all the measures that are out there?
Yeah. So obviously the most popular one. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. It feels like the most popular one right now is Measure 4.
Yep. Property tax.
We have at the Dakota, we have a debate that's going to happen between Keep It Local and unfair property tax. Dr. Rick Becker. It's going to be interesting to hear those, and I'll probably have a better where I stand on it after that.
Yeah.
Okay. I am nervous about a constitutional amendment.
Why?
Because that is so hard to undo.
Well, they are. Absolutely they are. I mean, and if you see, what is it, Measure 2? Measure 2 is trying to make it harder to make constitutional amendments.
Right. Which I
So-
don't know that that's right.
I don't think that's right either. I mean, basically what you have is politicians who the state folks don't believe are listening to us.
Right.
And so here we go. We get a constitutional amendment on there for legalizing marijuana and a constitutional amendment on there for ending unfair property tax. And then all of a sudden they follow up with this, well, hey, let's make it harder to get constitutional amendments on there. I'm not a fan of that either.
No.
It's like, if you guys don't want to listen to us, that's fine. But again, this is the state talking. This is all the population. It isn't just 80 people down in Bismarck that get to make these decisions. So, and again, let me just reiterate this. This is all my personal opinion on all the measures and everything else. There is no city council member Rob Fuller talking about this. This is just me as a citizen. So the end unfair property tax one, that obviously is the biggest one to almost everybody in the state. If you talk to people and hear things, the number one complaint from border to border, east to west, north to south, is how high property taxes are in North Dakota.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have to address it.
Yeah, it needs to be addressed. And I wish, and I know that there's been plenty of opportunity, and whenever I bring this up, people are like, yes, but it's been brought up over and over to legislature for property tax reform.
Is that what, 10 times since 2012 or something like that in
incredible
different
amount.
variations?
And now when Becker gets this back on the ballot here, then all of a sudden legislators are popping up with more plans of how this could be the one that gets through. And honestly, I have no confidence that those will. They've shown a record that they wouldn't happen.
Well, you mean within the legislature,
right? If the constitutional amendment did not go through, and then January happens and legislature's back in session, they're not going to amend property taxes most likely.
Well,
not to the degree that
no. If
people
this
are
were
asking for.
if this were to fail and stuff, I mean, they collect. I went to the Measure 4 thing on Monday at the luncheon up there at the Sleep Inn and listened to State Representative Hogue. And, the people in the legislature, I would tell you, are probably a little bit nervous about this. He didn't necessarily endorse voting for it. He had said some things like, well, we're going to have to take from here and we're going to have to do this and do this and do this. And then finally, one of the people in the audience, Jose Castaneda, I think he's running for the Senate in District 40 or whatever. He jumped up and said, hey, couldn't we put out like a flat tax across everything or do some other things? And then you kind of hear like, well, yeah, we could do that, and so I think what happens is, the guys in Bismarck, and again, I'm not taking shots at any of them. I'm just saying as a whole, get used to things being a certain way and they get comfortable, right? And nobody likes to have to change. But in this instance, if this goes through, they're going to have to figure some stuff out. Now, if you believe that they haven't been working on stuff leading up to session with this measure on the ballot, they have stuff in place that will, because they're not going to honestly continue to just take money out of the legacy fund or the other school funds or anything like that. I think, is it Measure 3? That's another one. So all of a sudden now Measure 3 in a biennium, they want to change it from being able to take 30% out of the legacy fund to only taking 5% out of the legacy fund. Gotcha. So again, that's another tactic, in my opinion, aimed at the property tax thing, because, I mean, if they didn't change the property tax and they just wanted to fund it out of that legacy fund, well, now we can only take 5% out of your guys, and that doesn't cover it. So, I mean, there's a lot of things, politics, that I see happening on these measures.
See, it makes you want to go for state level.
No, not at all. I'm good with the city stuff. I don't need anything.
You'll probably spend less time at state.
Well, all right, sign me up. Do I get paid for that one? Because
I think you get paid a little more when you're in session.
I'll stick with the city stuff. I like the local stuff. I mean, as much as I can say I like any of it.
Yeah, right. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Measure 4.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, you haven't formed an opinion on it?
Yeah, I don't have an official, but even what you're saying with the flat tax, and this is a concern that I think is fair, is so there was a $500 credit, right? Given back, which is like pennies for some people, that
was a half a percent of what I pay annually.
Right.
If that helps.
Exactly. So it's not much. And I honestly didn't even look. Was that flat just across the board?
Yeah, it didn't matter what you paid. Didn't matter who you were. You could just send in and get the $500 because, again, that came out last year.
Yeah.
When they started the measure initiation to try and get Measure 4 on there.
Yeah.
So
see, because like I that wouldn't have been 0.5% of what I pay.
Right.
That would have actually been a decent deal. I honestly didn't apply for it because I didn't feel like it was right. All right.
I think my wife applied for it. I didn't get.
You guys, no, you
for
should definitely apply for it.
Yeah.
But I shouldn't. My property tax bill is under $2,000 a year.
Gosh.
So you're talking like that's a huge deal,
right?
Compared
that's
to
a
you.
Quarter.
So
yeah, that's a
doing
quarter.
that way is not fair.
No,
it's just like how you guys. I think rather than going and giving checks back to everybody, say, hey, we have reserves. We'll give a $200 check back to everybody in the city.
Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah, that's a huge deal for me.
Absolutely,
but again, that'd be pennies for you.
Right. I mean, and not that I wouldn't take it.
No, right. And I'm not saying that'd be pennies for you in general, but just based off your property tax bill, that'd be pennies for you, right? So I don't think that's a fair way of doing it. I think reducing is the mills where it affects everybody evenly is more fair. But the reason I bring that up is the problem or a problem that I've heard brought up when I've interviewed people is that whenever there is tax relief that's given, it's always backfilled
with something else
by the cities, the local municipalities.
Yeah.
Go and backfill those areas with fees. So if there's a flat rate fee that's able to be paid or charged by the city for stuff, is that going to happen where you don't have to pay property taxes? So we're going to raise our rates on everything else.
Well, I mean, let's say that the measure goes through. The state has to give the same amount of property tax every year going forward, right?
Yeah.
Where does that come from? They have to find out a way to tax that, right? Because again, unless they figure out a new tax, they have to keep taking it out of the legacy fund and everything else.
Yeah, right.
So I find it hard to believe that they don't have an idea already of where they're going to get it. And I don't believe they're going to pull out of every single fund and everything and raise, I think somebody, Hogue had said the other day, we'll raise personal income tax by 10% and da-da-da-da-da. That isn't going to happen. They aren't going to do any of that stuff. It would be one of two things. It would either be sales tax, where they would raise it across the board in the state, or it would be a flat tax on property tax, meaning instead of being against your assessed value of your house, which is an arbitrary number that somebody can come up with and the state says has to be within this amount or whatever of an appraisal. Okay. You owe, and I'm just going to use a random number.
Yep.
I don't know anything about this, but let's say it's 21 mills.
Yep.
You owe 21 mills on the 10,000 square feet of property that you own.
Yep.
That's your tax every year, and it's done.
Right.
Rob Fuller on the 14,400 square feet of land that I own, I'm going to pay the same 21 mills. Farmer Bob out there who owns 43,560 acres per quarter, or square feet per quarter, is going to pay 21 mills on that. And so across the board, everybody starts paying a little bit or a little bit more,
Right.
And people are going to, and I think Senator Hogue the other day said, the farmers will come out of the woodwork screaming and yelling. Well, I don't want to be unfair to the farmers, but let me ask you a question. If you owned a $500,000 piece of property that was a quarter of land that you farm, and you had to pay between $500 and $1,000 tax on it, and it made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for you, is that fair? Right. If you have your home quarter, your homestead quarter, you can put $1 million house on there. You can put $500,000 worth of buildings on there. And if you farm it, I believe you don't ever have to pay any property tax on it. How fair is that all these groups throughout the state don't have to pay property tax, but those of us in the cities just get gobbled up by it? And I mean, to some degree, these folks out in the rural communities and everything, they're coming to town and they're using our infrastructure and the different things that are here. So, I mean, I think of, again, and you can do different things, but I think the flat tax is quite honestly the best option that we could look at.
They hope we do well so they can enjoy Longhorns. So
exactly.
and get us a Chick-fil-A. That's your job. Get us a Chick-fil-A to Minot.
Chick-fil-A has metropolitan requirements that we aren't probably ever going to meet.
Bummer. So that Measure 4 is interesting, and yeah, I can see the flat tax being a little more helpful there in some of those areas. So, interesting. I'll I'll make an opinion after the debate that we have October 3rd.
All right. I'm interested to see what your opinion is next week after. So when's the debate? Next Thursday?
Next Thursday at 7 p.m. Okay. So then that following Minot talk, I guess I can give an opinion.
Okay.
I hate giving opinions.
Oh,
why? I'm a master deflector.
You are. That's interesting.
No, I don't know. Another interesting one is Measure 5. I know my opinion on this one.
Okay.
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan?
I do not want marijuana to be legal in North Dakota.
Okay. Well, to a certain degree, it already is, right? Medicinal.
Yeah, it is medicinal.
It's already legal.
And sometimes that's pushed to the limits. But
I'm sure it is. I mean, I lived in Colorado when marijuana was introduced out there. And while it wasn't my thing and never has been my thing, I had friends who partook. They all had their medical marijuana cards, and they would go do their thing. And,
how hard was it to get a card?
There was some doctors in Denver that didn't make it very hard at all. I believe one of my good friends, at 36 years old or something like that, had degenerative disc disorder.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
Again, I think I agree with you. I don't know necessarily that it's the right move. I don't think. But the problem becomes we've already approved it medicinally. Yeah. All 3 states around us have approved it recreationally. Whether we want it to be or not, it's coming to North Dakota. And that's ultimately, I think, what's going to happen. Whether it's this time, next time, whatever. My idea, and I joked about this the other day, maybe I should have stood up at the Measure 4 luncheon the other day and said, hey, let's approve Measure 5, tax the crap out of it, and there's your revenue source to pay for the property tax. And the only reason I say that is because Colorado, the first year that they went with recreational marijuana, raised over $800 million in tax just off of that alone.
Right.
And they designated it mostly for roads and schools and everything like that. So I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Alcohol is legal. Those that want to partake do, and those that don't, right? And it can lead to a lot of bad things, just like those that take marijuana or those that don't. I mean, all of it can lead to bad things. It's about personal choices,
right?
When you're doing those things. So I'm kind of with you. I don't know if it's necessarily the right answer.
Is there a tax specific for alcohol in North Dakota?
I don't think there is. I think it's just regular sales tax, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Is like, do we go? Because at some point there probably was that same discussion that was had on alcohol.
Yeah,
like we just if we tax it heavy, then
add 10% to your alcohol tax. I mean, we're not going to stop having beers and wine and everything else.
But eventually it goes. Like in the future, does that tax just go away because people aren't as passionate about? Like, come on, we all enjoy some good marijuana, so let's go ahead and just get rid of the tax. Does that happen?
I don't think so. But I mean, Colorado, I've been out of Colorado 12 years.
Yeah, it's been around for a while there.
They've been taxing it like that, and they haven't seen any slowdowns or anything. I guess
people like money too.
They do. They do.
So it's they go at each other. Yeah. No, I get the revenue side of it.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of it. I think it creates dangers, but I think it also...
Let me ask you a question, though, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but we already have a drug problem around here, don't we?
Right. I mean, we should probably tax fentanyl, too.
Yeah. I mean, fentanyl, I went for a ride-along with one of the PD a week and a half ago or whatever it was. Great experience, I did during the day. And I asked just a simple question. We were talking about drugs in Minot and everything, and I said, heroin and meth and blah, blah, blah. And he said, that isn't it at all anymore. He said 80+% of what we find and are finding illegally and stuff is fentanyl.
Wow.
And it's fentanyl pills. And he said, you can get high for $8 in Minot, North Dakota. And I was like, what? So I guess my question to you would be, is that what you're talking about worse than what we already have going on? And yes, I know we're talking about making this legal, but what we have going on here right now with some of the harder drugs and everything else, we got a drug problem as a whole in this country, in this state. Right. And I think we need to address that.
Right. Yeah. I guess for me, it's like, how far do we go down this road?
Right. Yeah. We're going to be Oregon where we everything that's hardcore is legal.
Right.
Yep. I think they're going back on that now, aren't they?
But it's really hard to go back. When you get stuff in place, it's really hard to go back. So you're talking about and I don't know the history of this stuff, but I would just imagine that probably some of these other deals, just even tobacco use and stuff like that, there had to be some debates that were had on that of whether or not how legal it should be and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, tobacco is as addictive a substance, I mean, as there is out there, I think. And they especially tax that, don't they?
Right. They do. They do. And it still happens.
Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting. I get the deal. It's probably not as harmful as others. You need to be careful when you don't want somebody high behind the wheel of a car or anything
Absolutely.
like that. There's probably cases where you can smoke too much and it could take your life, but it's probably not as common. Just like alcohol, you typically aren't going to drink yourself to death.
Well, again,
that's going to happen over time.
It's about choices, right? I mean, it's about how much, I suppose, if you are going to use it, how much you use. Do you get behind the wheel, or just like somebody that's been drinking? Do they? I mean, it's about those personal choices.
Yeah.
So
makes sense, but I just can't get on board with it.
I hear you. I totally hear you. What about measures 1, 2, and 3? What do you think about them?
So 2 was the one about what the
making it constitutional.
Yep. And that, when I heard about that, I thought that was dumb, because that is one thing that's really neat. And I did ask the question, honestly, I asked it to somebody because of term limits and age limits. And I just don't know. I don't like that.
Well,
why
would we take the power out of the people's hands?
And I think it's, this is, all right, first off, I don't think it's a good idea to strengthen that, to make it more difficult for us to get on the ballot, okay? But this is my problem with it, is when you go and have marketing experts that know how to get stuff passed, pushing ideas that if you pulled North Dakota, I don't know, but it seems like almost everybody I talk to, term limits is not a bad idea, but it should not have been 8 years.
What should it have been?
12 years.
Yeah.
Just 8 years is just too fast.
Well, it's only 4 congressional sessions, so you can, because we're every biennium, right? So yeah, it needed to maybe be extended a little bit.
Their first time being in office, first 4 years, they're just getting comfortable. Next 4 years, they're finally starting to take action, and then the next 4 years would be like they're okay, and now you're done. Like,
but it's 8 years in each legislative body.
You can go to both sides.
Yep.
You can go to both sides, so you can get 16 years total. And even in that, if you go and you talk with some people, they'll say the reason why people are passionate about this is not even local. It's because they see it nationally. They see it on the federal level. And so that's why they're passionate about term limits, even though it has no effect on that.
Right.
So you have people that are positioning stuff and marketing stuff in a certain way to get it passed.
Right. Making it look like it's something that it isn't.
And then once it's done, people are like, well, that probably wasn't the best way to do it.
Right.
That's my frustration with it, is not, going down that road. You have term limits, now you have age limits. Who knows what will happen? Probably will pass. Actually, that one already did pass, didn't it?
That one did. I think that was June.
Yeah, that was in June, and it did pass.
61% or something.
So it's that's my frustration with it. So I do not think because I think that the people should have that choice.
Absolutely.
My frustration with the way that's being done right now is it's like this alternative route that is used for marketing. Property tax is probably a great place for this to be. Like
right.
This is probably one of this is somebody that is North Dakota funded. Yep. Is grassroots. It's truly everything. It's not an outside interest group paying money to try to get this on. This is like exactly how it should be done.
Yep.
And so I think that's great.
Yeah.
But some of those others, it's not. It's outside interest groups that are saying, "Hey, you guys have easy laws.
Yeah.
We're going to exploit that."
Yeah.
That's not cool.
And I agree with that. I mean, but again, we have to have a little bit of faith in the people voting too, right? I mean. So let's say let's use measure 5 with the marijuana, and let's say that's mainly coming from outside interest groups and everything like that. The people in North Dakota are smart people, you know. I mean, we're paying attention, or a lot of us are for the most part, you know. So we realize that some of this stuff is being pushed into the state from out of state and from big money interest groups and stuff like that, and so we'll handle it when it comes time to vote it, you know. But like my scary thought with this is. And let's go back to the property tax thing. And I think we said we've seen 10 initiatives in 12 years, and the legislature still has not picked it up to do anything with it because they don't care what we think. So this is where that becomes ultimately the most important part. if we can't do it through a constitutional amendment, like they make it harder to do,
Right.
how would we ever do it?
Okay, let me come back on you at that
Okay.
because, and the people of North Dakota are smart. I'm not dissing the people of North Dakota, but let's be fair. The same people voting on the constitutional amendments are the same people that are voting for their elective officials.
Correct.
So, for term limits, the classic argument was like, wait a minute, like you're wanting us to put a limit. We're limiting our own power now. Right. We cannot vote somebody back into office because we said we can't do that.
Yeah.
We're limiting ourselves. Okay. And I understand the power of the incumbent and how difficult it is to unseat the incumbent. But some of the stuff needs to happen where there's people that have been there for a long time that, hey, there just needs to be some new people that get in there, and that's up to the people to do that.
Yep. I agree with
It's
that.
also up to people like you to run.
Well, it is.
And you did at the city. And I say that not that you need to run for the state, but like people that are get out of their comfort zones and run for offices.
I mean, there's something, whether it be morally, ethically, or financially, that drives people to get involved in politics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and for me, it was the fiscal.
It was the money.
Yeah, I mean, we were spending money, like I think I said at the last city council meeting. We don't have a revenue problem.
Right.
We bring in plenty of revenue in the city of Minot. We have a spending problem.
Right.
And so whatever it is that you use as your motivating factor to go do that, you're absolutely right. But people can always be swayed by the special interest groups. We know that. I mean, it happens nationally. And like you said, they voted in term limits thinking, well, maybe it will have something to do with the federal stuff because they made it seem like that.
Right.
Not knowing that you have to have a meeting of all the states, and you have to have 2/3 plus one state to approve this all. And so, I mean, term limits nationally would be a huge lift.
Yeah.
Where in the state, it's not quite a huge lift. But I think you're right. We could have gone with maybe 3 terms rather than
2.
Yeah.
The other thing with it is like people have to vote off this, and this is basically what they're going to read. Constitutional Measure 1. This measure amends and reenacts sections 12 and 13 of Article 9 of the Constitution of North Dakota related to terminology describing public institutions.
Okay.
What in the world is that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
One of the things, I'm just going to bring up my phone here because I had it up there.
But and do that because we'll talk about Measure 1. But somebody should go and get amendment of how this information is displayed on the ballot. Yeah. Is what I'm getting at, because there's not enough information that's given to you.
Correct. So, yeah, when you look at the ballot and they just give you the legal jargon that the measure is, you don't really understand. I mean, obviously, property tax and the recreational marijuana one, those are going to be easily understandable. But 1, 2, and 3 are kind of legalese, I mean, it's wordy. Right. So I think there's a couple of sites out there like, is it ballotpedia.org?
Yeah.
They explain them really well. So for anybody needing to know a little bit more information, but I agree with you. They need to be in common language rather than in legal language, know, because we don't understand all of that stuff sometimes.
And I'm sure they have to be careful because there can't be influence on how the common language is worded to make it sound more appeasing or not appeasing. So I'm sure there's like this balance that they're playing. So that's why the legalese was the safest route. But you would never guess that Measure 1 is just about changing some names for public institutions.
From what is it? From insane asylum, right? We can't call the mental institute in Jamestown the insane asylum anymore. We're going to have to call it whatever if that passes. Right. So
State Hospital for the Care of Individuals with Mental Illness.
Oh, there you go.
Instead of mentally ill. Just small things. So it's probably, other than the fact that
is that the politically correct woke stuff?
I have no idea. Right. Okay. And that's the part that always concerns you is like, I'm not into all that stuff.
Me either.
So just let's be real. We know you're not into it because we see your shirt today.
Everybody, I'm repping the Sioux. Old school Sioux. I was a Sioux guy. I'll always be a Sioux guy. And no offense to anybody, but it was a great nickname and it should have never been changed. Just my opinion.
And perhaps the new name still holds the old name, right?
It does. So we were talking about this a little bit ago. I don't know how many people have ever heard this and how true it is or isn't, but they said when they were discussing what to change the name to, somebody wrote down on a piece of paper, "How about we keep Sioux?" Right? It. And if that's true, that's where Hawks, if you take the first letter of each one of those words, that's where Hawks came from. If that is true, that is literally the greatest snub to the NCAA that I ever saw.
It's
so
fantastic.
It is.
You should do a podcast on that one day. You should get somebody from them and just talk about the name change
from the
process.
NCAA.
Well, that'd be really great. But even just from Eastern North Dakota.
Oh, yeah, we can do that
and talk about the name change.
I think you're misjudging my ability to get people to come in here and talk to me a little bit.
Who knows? I'm sure they would love it. So
what else?
Let's see. We got the constitutional measure 3. We already kind of talked about that one. That's interesting. That's probably not great.
I think 2 and 3, both of them again are just power grabs by the legislature. One of them making it harder to get constitutional amendments, and one of them making it harder to spend money out of the legacy fund, which they use as their giant piggy bank.
Yeah. So, it's fantastic.
And what did Alderman Blessum call it? Piles of money. They got piles of money. So,
you know who started that? My understanding, based off the interview that I had with him, was Hogue.
Oh, really?
He was. I don't know that you could say that he started it, but he was one of the proponents of getting it going.
Oh,
which is interesting, and it's obviously no slight to him.
No.
But interesting. Minot being represented.
Yeah.
Making some big change in North Dakota.
Well, I mean, it's good to have, local people up there watching out for Minot and doing the things that our representatives should be doing.
Right.
So.
Well, we've talked about a lot.
We have. What else? You got anything else, or we're going to wrap this one up?
We're gonna talk about you getting a pager anytime soon?
No, I'm not getting a pager anytime soon. Funny note, I had a pager for about 6 months. I was late ever getting on the pager thing back in the 90s. It wasn't my thing. Went to work at a place, got a pager, had it about 6 months, and then cell phones came out, and I was like, who needs a pager, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think you're referring to the Israeli Hezbollah thing going on over there in the Middle East.
That's crazy.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
Like that the Israeli Mossad or whatever, like their CIA guys were able to effectively get these pagers that were ordered by Hezbollah, get them diverted while they were being shipped over there, replace one of the batteries with a small explosive that looked just like a battery, and then put a trigger in there, and then wait for them all to go active. Like, that's warfare, in my opinion, on a different level. But I will say this. You get what you give. I mean, those guys, like the Hezbollah and the Hamas and the terrorists over there, they don't play by the same rules, so why should we?
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
You're right. If you were 18 right now, would you suggest an 18-year-old to join the military?
Oh, boy.
I know that's like a whole rabbit hole.
That is.
But when you look at just
what's going on in the world? No, I mean, like, let's just take my sons. Both of my sons are, younger. They're 5 and 7.
Yeah.
And I support our military. Vets, I 100% love everything about it. But boy, with the way the world is trending and the things that are going on out there, and in my opinion, some of the loose foreign policy that we've been throwing out as a country, I wouldn't want my kids to be in the military in the next 20 years.
It's crazy.
It is.
It's sad because, like you talked to, you don't find many people that join the military for love of country anymore.
No, it's not a thing.
You find they join for love of free college, love of career advancement.
Yeah, you still have those percentages though that are like family, right? I mean, my dad was in, my uncle was in. You'll still have those.
We
guys.
need more of that.
We do. But
we're losing it.
You got to be proud of your country, and I don't think we incentivize our youth anymore to be proud of our country with a lot of the stuff that's going on.
That's probably a good podcast. But I think like the scary part though is just the fact that you can't trust anything. You can't trust a pager. Like, at what point in life did you not trust that? Right.
Right.
The people that are in that battle right now, they have to be scared of every single tech thing they touch.
Oh, absolutely. Like, if they were, if the Israelis were able to get to these 5,000 pagers, what else do we have that they got to, right?
Do you turn on that lamp or not?
Wait, should I watch some TV tonight? And it just blows up,
exactly.
Your remote control goes off.
Exactly.
In your hand? So.
Like, you don't trust anything. And they never, probably if you're in that environment, you never trust a phone. Like, you're constantly switching those out, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think that's why they said they went to pagers, because phones could be tracked and everything, and pagers couldn't.
See, already.
So but I mean, did you read much into that whole story?
I honestly didn't read much.
So some of the stuff that I saw come out, and I thought this was, again, not trying to be gruesome or graphic in any way, but the Israelis were so smart that they didn't just set them off while they were in a pocket or something. Some of them obviously went off like that, but 15 seconds before they blew up, they actually sent out a regular text that they, everybody would look at their pager, and then it blows up like when I, so.
What did the text say?
They did not say in the article.
You got punked.
I'm sure it said something pretty haha or whatever it was. So, but anyway, I mean, but what you're able to do anymore with technology and some of this stuff, I mean, that's a whole different level.
Oh man, that's a different level of warfare. I'm not signing up for that. They won't let me anymore.
I mean, we haven't even gotten into the AI stuff, right?
That's got to be interesting. On the like AI is obviously interesting in how it's affecting our everyday lives, but when you're talking about warfare and stuff like that, the way that they're utilizing that's probably got to be.
Well, I mean, they have these computers now that can predict what's going to happen. I mean, within like an 80 to 90% accuracy rate. Like it's, by taking everything that this country or this person's done in the last 50 years, it computes it and goes, this is what they're going to do. And where they're going and what they're doing.
Okay. So let's take it back stateside.
Okay.
Should AI become our judges?
Wow. That's a great question. I've never even thought about something like that. If you can take AI and put it into baseball games and football games and get rid of referees and umpires and everything else, why couldn't you do it with the legal system? But the part about the AI thing in the legal system is then it takes not emotion, but all human feeling out of it, right?
Right. So there's a book that Malcolm Gladwell wrote, and I can't remember the name of it right now. And this was a couple of years ago. And they were saying that when the decisions of judges, they looked at one in New York. When it was ran through this model, the times that the judge felt feeling, more often than not, it caused more harm.
Right.
Most of the time, the person that they let off with a low bail or whatever went out, and if it's a domestic violence situation, they did worse that time. Right. Whatever it might be. Okay, and so that's a really interesting thing because you do have the situation where you have the 18-year-old that completely messed up, and you can tell that this is probably a one-time situation. But if you ran it through a model, it'd say, no, there's no way you can let this guy off. Yep. Everything says don't let him off, but you just know that this is, and there's stories that you hear of the 18-year-old that did get let off and never went back, and it was a learning point. I mean,
they've fixed their life or their decision making, right? Like I'm going to push back on you on that and say, okay, let's take the sheriff out in Tennessee. Have you seen this? The one that walked in and shot the judge?
Okay, yep.
Okay, are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
So if you put that case, right, the sheriff said this judge was molesting my daughter.
Right.
There's no judge, jury. I think as a dad, any of us would feel the same way. That case is pretty much determined. You put it in front of AI, and it's going to say, nope, this is the law.
Right.
Doesn't matter. He's guilty. You put that in front of a human, a person that has children, and they're going to go, you know what? This guy was emotionally damaged. Like he was upset. There was exigent circumstances here. You're not going to see that, I don't think, with the AI models.
Yep.
So
and that's very much on the flip side, where that sheriff may not face life or whatever that he would actually get if it was through an AI model.
Right. I mean, again, if you're having AI determine it, life in prison, premeditated.
Yeah. But the AI doesn't get to have feelings, but there could be factors that maybe could be built into a model.
You're absolutely right. I mean, are we going to give it consciousness? Are we going with Skynet?
Yeah, probably not going that far. But it'd be an interesting thing. AI is a very interesting tool. What jobs will replace?
Well, and then like that, the reason I brought that up is, you asked about kids in the military.
Yeah.
I think with the AI things coming in the future, I think it's going to be null and void, quite honestly. But I mean, it makes being a human in battle or war 100% more dangerous than I think just human versus human, right? Because I mean, our whole world is about to change with this AI thing. If you look, I was reading an article and listening to a thing this morning. Google and Microsoft and these companies. Do you see what they're trying to do across the country?
What is that?
They're trying to open nuclear power plants because they know that we need 3,000 million kilowatts to run some of the AI stuff in the future. So they're trying to open and own nuclear power plants.
I'm sure Gates will find some land in North Dakota for it.
So Bill Gates and Microsoft, well, I don't know how much he's involved with Microsoft anymore, but they're trying to reopen 3 Mile Island in New York.
Oh, wow.
As their own private nuclear facility to power this stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So does war, and we had a very vague topic list, and this was not on it.
Yeah.
But we're having a good time with it. So does war eventually become video games?
Absolutely.
Because already in some ways almost is.
It is. Absolutely.
With the drones and stuff like that.
Well, with the drones, not only that, but if you look at even the guys flying the planes, right?
Yeah.
We have standoff weapons that are 50 to 100 miles. You know, you're engaging it at that distance and they can't even see you, like the F-22.
Okay.
Excuse me. That's a video game. You're pushing a button. You never see what happens on the other end, right? And ultimately, I think as time goes on, and we start to replace the human aspect with the intelligence aspect. In fact, DARPA already has a stealth fighter. Do you remember the movie Stealth back in the day?
I don't watch movies.
Okay,
I'm lame.
Oh, no worries. But it was about an AI type fighter that was put in with a group of.
Isn't that incredible?
It is.
When was the movie done?
Late 90s, early 2000s. So, 20 years ago. Maybe a little bit less, give or take. But
yeah, that's crazy.
And they showed the problems, that AI could have, but they've already developed a plane that's flown by AI that's controlled. There's no pilot. There's no joystick guy in a box somewhere in Minot, North Dakota running it. It's all controlled by the AI, you know? And so
that's scary.
You look at some of these robot drones they have out there, right? Like the dogs and the humans that walk, you can't knock them over. That is the future in 10 years.
So then what is war? So I think about, not often, but I think about like, how old is America?
200 and some years old. 50, 40.
Right around 50, between 40 and 50 years. So 76, so 250 would be in 2 years. Yeah. So that means that we're pushing it. We're old. America's old.
Yeah.
All right. As far as old for retaining dominance.
Yeah.
We should be losing that soon, sadly, based off history.
Absolutely.
And sadly, it feels like current events might be supporting it sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. In the past, that meant that a whole nother army comes in and wipes you out.
Yeah.
Right. But we're getting to the place where that may happen, but it ain't going to happen that way.
No.
At what point does war just become unproductive?
Well,
completely, because you have this video game, this robot fighting this robot, and it's not even, you have 5,000 people, we got 3,000 people, you're probably gonna beat us.
Right.
It ain't about that no more.
No, it's not like the game of Risk, back in the day.
Yeah, I got all these people.
I think what you're going to see going forward, and we've seen some of it to some degree, is some of the, and this is probably going to be an unpopular thing, but the COVID. I firmly believe that was released on purpose on the world population by the Chinese as a
test, or do you think it was actually? Obviously there was, if it was done that way, there was negative intent, but it was as a test just to see how it worked.
No, I think they'd had it in the lab over there. They knew how it would work, right?
Okay.
They had tested it. They'd done gain of function, all of that stuff.
Were they testing to see how people would react? Was a test so that way they could, when they're ready, they could actually release it and take action, or was that their?
I think that was their first initiation to war. They wanted, and maybe twofold, right? Let's see how much of the population it does affect, right? And then
see what the leaders do of those places and stuff.
But ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to, right? It's either going to be a bunch of robots fighting each other, or it's going to be some kind of biological thing, or an EMP, right? They launch a nuke over the United States, they EMP us, and we're back in the Stone Age.
Yeah. Would you be all right?
Well, I would be. I have plenty of guns and ammunition and other things, and I think I have enough life skills where I could probably be okay. But what do you do without power?
You come find me, because I probably won't be all right.
You'll need some help? Yeah. I've already had a number of people tell me, when this happens, we know where we're going. We're going to Rob's house. And I'm like, my house is full.
Yeah. Pretty good. Yeah. But no, you're right. EMPs are, that'd be the way that our world is so dependent on that. We got through COVID and we'd get through COVID. I know that's human life, but EMP would be human life too.
Yeah.
That'd be a terrible way to go.
As society breaks down, right? That's the problem. It isn't like they're going to attack us and fight us.
Right.
Why would you need to? If you can do something like that where society breaks down, our population starts dying off, and the rest of us are fighting to survive,
Yeah.
you've eliminated us.
You have.
So-
You have. Yep. Interesting things. Yeah. War. I don't know much about it, but war is an interesting subject. You
All
know
right.
about it way more than me. But
Well,
it's been a good time, man.
it has. This has been awesome. So we'll wrap up this show. I want to thank Jonathan for being on with me. We'll be back here next week, so come on back and see us. We'll have some new topics. If anybody wants to talk about anything in particular, let us know. And then watch Jonathan's other stuff coming up. We got the debate on Measure 4 next week, and then after that, we're going to put his feet to the fire and see what his opinion is. And we'll just keep going. So anyway, this is Rob and Jonathan signing off. Thanks, guys, for watching.
Boom.